his head on the floating Mutania, shaking the ship violently, causing the cloak of invisibility to go off. Everyone became shocked and awestruck to see the shrunken Mutania floating in the air, spinning and wobbling from Wilson's accidentally bashing his head on it. As Wilson staggered about by his podium, one of the Secret Service men thought he was being attacked by a Soviet weapon. He pulled out his gun and fired, ripping a hole in Mutania's side and causing it to spin out of control off the stage. The crew of Mutania were shaken badly by the now gigantic bullet. "Shields!" yelled Newton. Mason quickly snapped off the deflector shields. When the invisible shields came on it, causing Wilson. When the invisible shield came on, it caused Wilson to go flying back onto his back, knocking him unconscious 30 feet away. Seeing that caused all the president's bodyguards to fire at the strange floating object they feared to be hostile. Mutania just floated in the air with the bullets falling harmlessly to the ground after coming in contact with its deflector shield system. One bodyguard pulled out a machine gun and fired everything he had at Mutania. That just caused the bridge of Mutania to shake lightly. Another Secret Service man picked up a chair and began swinging wildly at Mutania. The man had a crazed, stupid look on his face as he tried to fight through the ship's shields that held him back like a powerful water current. He sure looks ridiculous, laughed Obakoba. The man did look stupid. He had a butchy-looking flat top for hair. Suddenly, he managed to hit the side of Mutania, causing Mutania to spin about uncontrollably over the crowd of stunned spectators. The Marine, with a crazed look, came in to get another strike, but suddenly a red phaser beam shot out from underneath Mutania and struck the man in the chest, causing the man to explode into a violent red smoky cloud. Everyone screamed with horror and dashed about with terror to escape the White House lawn as the man's blood and other body parts dripped from them. "What in the hell happened?" asked Newton. It was the computer," shouted Callisto. "It took the man's actions as an attacking giant." "Well, great. That's just great," shouted Newton angrily. "The president will blame the Soviets for this, and the Soviets will blame America for it. Then everything will be changed from an early nuclear war, to an early nuclear war. Sheena, get that cloaking device on now." "It's not working, Newton," shouted frightened Sheena. "What? Not working?" Mason put more power to the deflector shields. "Who knows what may befall us now?" Suddenly, a killer army helicopter flew down over the White House and locked its guns and missiles onto Mutania. Mutania flew out over the White House garden, and right as it was passing over the water fountain, the helicopter began firing at it. The bullets had no effect on Mutania, but the missiles caused it to rock and shake violently, causing it to wobble in its path. Everyone ran frighteningly through the streets. Mutania began to fly through the streets also, hoping the helicopter wouldn't pursue it. But it did. The helicopter caused Mutania to shake violently again. Suddenly, Sheena fell from the latest helicopter strike, causing her to fall on the shrink machine. Mutania began to quickly shrink smaller. By the time Newton turned it off, Mutania was now the size of a frisbee. Realizing that Mutania wouldn't be able to survive very well if the helicopter shot at it at its present size, Newton looked at Sergeant Storm and shouted, "Fire!" Two phaser beams shot out from underneath Mutania and struck the attack helicopter in the rotating blades, causing the blades to fly off and crash through the walls of buildings and cars. As two cars flipped over and exploded, the helicopter fell, skidded on its side, and crashed into a department store, then exploded, causing the department store to explode also. "Mason, take us out into orbit. We have to risk it, no matter what the cost," shouted Newton, falling back in his throne with sweat pouring out of him. "Man, how ridiculous this day has been," laughed Newton with self-directed anger. As Mutania shot up skyward to escape Washington, D.C., it was suddenly being hit with a laser beam that began to use up the last of the shield's very quickly. "Newton, they are now firing a laser at us," screamed Sheena. "Can we shake them?" asked Newton. "By the time we do, all our lithium crystals will be drained. This is nothing, but the black mutant really hurt us. Said Doug Davis. "Fire phasers at the laser," shouted Newton. Red phaser beam shot out of Mutania and hit the laser on the ground, causing it to instantly explode. As Mutania entered the Earth's orbit, Sheena shouted, "They've actually fired a missile at us, Newton. Can we outmaneuver it?" asked Newton. "Yes." "Okay, when it gets out into orbit, destroy it," said Newton. And the missile was. On Earth, President Wilson sat in his room shaking with violent terror. Borsky called him on the red telephone and told him that it wasn't a UFO that attacked him, but that it was a Soviet attack robot that his country had created to keep the US in Soviet order. The next time you don't say what we tell you to say, and you will die horribly, I promise," snickered Borsky. The next day, and the news said that the president was attacked by a U.S. military weapon that got out of control and had to be brought down by missile. The news said it was a result of the news said that it was the result his country had created to keep the U.S. The next time you don't say what we tell you to say, and you will die horribly, I promise, snickered Borsky. The next day, and the news said that the president was attacked by a U.S. military weapon that got out of control and had to be brought down by missile. The news said it was a result of the news said that it was the result of a mad capitalist scientist going insane from working on the anti-Soviet SDI system. Out in orbit, while Mutania was trying to restore its size, the Black Mutant was studying the pictures on his viewing screen. The Black Mutant was shocked to see how closely the probe looked like his and Newton's ship, but never had the urge to put two and two together. The Black Mutant was still relishing over the fact that he was boxing champion of the world. This next story I'm about to read to you is called Living the Dull Life. In the orbit of Earth, the Black Mutant was watching the news on his ship's viewing screen to see what was happening to his robot who took the place of him when he beat the world heavyweight champion several days ago. After the Black Mutant had taken on the identity of the contender and killed the champion, the police grabbed him and threw him in the pen. Scientists showed up to study Mr. Sheridan, thinking Sheridan was some new breed of evolution-produced Superman. Seeing that he was going to be locked up and studied in prison since he killed Sheridan's manager, the Black Mutant called his ship and had himself beamed up. At the same time of being transported by the Black Mutant, the Black Mutant had his crew beam down a robot manufactured with blood and pulsating veins under its 98.5 temperature skin. The robot was made to look exactly like Sheridan and to act and talk like Sheridan. With this charade, while this charade went on, the mutant started planning a way of having his robot fake death so he could beam him up. The robot was a very valuable instrument to the Black Mutant. On Mutania, there wasn't any robots, only computers, and now Newton was using all the power of his ship's computer to find a way of repairing the size change machine that was broken and could only cause Mutania to shrink. The size change machine was an alien contraption built by a race of brilliant beings from the Zebton galaxy. The beings were so brilliant, and the shrink ray was so complicated that it was definitely not child's play finding a way to get it to work again. This size change machine that was on Mutania was originally the Black Mutants who stole the machine from the Zebton galaxy. On Mutania, the ship's computers were steaming to crack the size expanding formula. Down on Earth, scientists, guarded by police, walked into the cell of the robot Sheridan. Sheridan just stared at the wall. A scientist walked up to the robot and asked, "What makes you so strong?" A minute passed and Sheridan responded with, "Lucky Strike cigarettes." A few hours later, Sheridan was undergoing all sorts of tests, making the Black Mutant nervous. The Black Mutant's ship computer was working overtime, trying to make the robot sound as much like Sheridan as possible. When a psychiatrist asked him for why he killed his manager, Sheridan responded with, "It was an accident. He wanted to know how strong my artificial arm was. He let me put my hand on his head, then squeeze. It made a crunching sound, and I realized that then and there that something was definitely amiss." The words artificial and amiss hit the ears of scientists and the Black Mutant as well. They realized that this was something Sheridan wouldn't normally say. The Black Mutant felt more and more like destroying his expensive, truthful robot. "No!" shouted the mutant when he saw the scientists examine the artificial hand. "Where did you get it?" they asked. "From the great, terrific, godly, powerful, almighty ruler and king, the Black Mutant." Everyone looked at each other with confusion. "Oh no!" shouted the Black Mutant. Now everything will change for me. I'll have no universe to go back to." "Where is this wonderful being?" asked some of the now excited scientists. Sheridan smiled with reverence, pointed up into the air. News bulletins all over the world began to flash that Sheridan had been visited by aliens from space, and that they had fitted him with powerful artificial limbs, and that the leader of the being was known as the Black Mutant. Sheridan was still put in prison for stuffing his manager under the bed to continue the fight with Nimbus. Nimbus's friends and family felt that they should throw away the key for having shared and knocking Nimbus's head off like that. The blacks in America began shouting, "No wonder Sheridan beat a brother. 'Twas machinery that made him like no other." One of the new Black Panthers yelled, "If Sheridan hadn't had those artificial limbs, Nimbus would have knocked him into the Twilight Zone with all the other honkies." On Mutania, Callisto had finally got the computer to be able to fix the size change machine. An hour later, and Mutania grew back to its full size. "Thank God. Thank God," shouted Jeff Long. Some of the crew shook hands. "Now what?" asked Sheena to Newton. "How many people want to beam down with me to Earth?" asked Newton. "Where? What part?" "Believe it or not, I think I'll beam down someplace in America. I think we have seen enough of Europe," said Newton as he walked to the transporter room. He then stopped and said, "Remember, we are here to sightsee, not have fun. We don't want to change time. I have a feeling that the Black Mutant has already begun to change time, and his first hand was seen in that boxing match. I'm sure of it." "Don't you think we have done some changing time ourselves when we accidentally killed those people in Washington, D.C.?" asked Callisto. "Well, thank God for the Soviets lying, saying that they did it. We are still here in one piece, so maybe we can enjoy the dull life a little bit longer. We still have to think of our main objective, finding the Black Mutant." Newton and his crew walked to the transporter room. Callisto had to stay aboard the ship because he was not able to look human, and he would attract too much attention. Newton then asked his crew where they would like to beam down to. Major Matt Mason wanted to visit Arizona for some reason. Sheena and Doug Davis wanted to see New York. Jeff Long and Obakoba wanted to see Los Angeles, and Sergeant Storm wanted to visit the Soviet Union for some strange reason. "Why?" asked Newton. I want to see if Russia is really as horrible a place as they say it is. I'm beginning to think that we are hearing a lot of capitalistic propaganda on the air lately." "Believe me, Storm," said Mason, "you aren't. Prime Minister Borsky was the ruler of Russia at this time, and he made Stalin and Hitler look like Abe Lincoln, practically. If you beam down there, make sure you have a phaser and a button for quick beaming back." "I'll keep an eye out for him," said Callisto. "Good, Callisto. Don't let anything happen to Storm. He's the best engineer we have on the ship," said Newton. A few minutes later, and everyone got to beam down in the area where they wanted to beam down. They kept their communicators handy so they could beam to all the other areas of Earth if things got boring. Newton decided to beam down in New York with Davis and Sheena. For money, Newton and his crew had Mutania make them diamond rings that they could sell and get lots of money for going to restaurants. "We're going to eat at all the best places," said Newton to Davis and Sheena. Even though he couldn't eat regular food, just electricity and atomic energy. In L.A., Jeff Long and Obakoba were walking down the Sunset Strip watching the girls go by. They then followed two girls into a record store and struck up a conversation with them. The girls didn't think much of the two black men. One an Earthling, the other a mutant alien Earthling who was Jeff Long's older clone duplicate, said, Uh, well, they walked into the place. "You're brothers, aren't you?" asked the pretty redhead to one. Asked the pretty redheaded one to Obakoba. "Well, we are related," said Jeff Long. The girls then began to walk away. "Hey," said Jeff Long, "you may not believe this, but we are pretty out of this world. We are pretty out of this world men." "Are you any Stevie Jennings?" asked the foxy blonde. "Who's he?" asked Obakoba, trying to sound cool. "You don't know?" said the redhead. "What's he do?" asked Jeff Long. The two pretty girls began to leave. Jeff Long and Obakoba watched them leave. "Man, they're almost as pretty as Sheena," said Obakoba, discouraged. The two later found out that Jennings was the world's latest rock idol, and that he and the band called the Quasars were coming close to reviling the Beatles. "Hey, I remember the Quasars," said Obakoba. "They were the last band of the late 1990s, and they almost ended up being the best band in the 20th century. But it was the Beatles that stayed known as the Shakespeares of the 20th century rock." Jeff Long looked down at the floor of the record store and said, feeling a little mediocre, "Those pretty girls only like them because they are something, and we are nothing. You know, Koba, Mutania's main computers contain all the songs and music ever composed on Earth, and all the music ever composed from the Klingons, Romulans, Zibtans, Industro, Beltex. It is them all, and the greatest hits that were ever composed, and will be composed." Obakoba began to smile. "You're not thinking what I think you're thinking, are you?" he asked, with a smile on his face. "I'm trying not to. Oh man, if we took the greatest hits to be composed from the 21st century that were composed on Earth and from Scott territory, man, we could end up being known as the greatest musicians of all time. If we just took a few songs, put them on the old any cassette tape, put them on the old blank cassette tape, handed it over to some producer. Oh man, damn, it's so damn tempting. Look, Jeff, we can't do that. It would be plagiarism," said Obakoba. "But these great artists haven't even been born yet," shouted Jeff Long with great excitement, making the people in the record store look at him. Obakoba said, "We can't. It would change time. Not only that, but it's got to be immoral because we would be stealing people's ideas. Hey, these artists like Gog and Twilight and Twilish. These artists like Gog and Twilish were creative geniuses. What we could take from them, we just make them create something else. It would change time. We can't do it, man," shouted Obakoba. Jeff Long looked angry, then depressed. "I guess you're right. It might cause the God of this universe to, I don't know. It probably would screw things up terribly."